Greetings gamers, my name is Anto and today we're going to talk about my favourite RPG book of 2022. This video is sponsored by the SIDEQUEST Annual, more on them later. This week Paizo released the Lost Omens travel guide and I was lucky enough to get a preview copy of the PDF, and I've got to say within maybe 5 minutes of cracking this thing open and starting to read it, I had a pretty strong inclination that this was going to be my favourite books of the year, and by the time I finished it I think it might have actually ended up being one of my favourite books in the RPG space just that I've ever read. Now I know that's a bold statement and I'm going to clarify it a little, but I want to say right at the top, if you're a 5th edition player, this video is still for you. This book is still for you because more than being specific to any one game system, this is a world setting book and it can apply to any game system. And even if you don't play Pathfinder, even if you don't run a game in a world similar to Pathfinder, there is going to be stuff in this book that is going to be relevant to you and that you will get inspiration from. So the core premise of the book is that it is a travel guide. It's the Inner Sea region's travel guide. So the Inner Sea region is the main campaign area of Pathfinder 2nd Edition's Galarian world. It's where most of their stuff takes place. Every year they release at least one book that details a part of that world. Like last year they released the Mwangi Expanse, which is a 200 and something page, pretty, decently sized book talking about just one region in this world. But the Lost Omens Travel Guide is a broad overview of what it is like to be a person in that region. There's already the Lost Omens Setting Guide, which gives you kind of a high-level introduction to all of the regions in the world. But this book, the Travel Guide, is much more focused on the human element. It's much more focused on what it is like to live in this region. And for me, the most impressive thing about this is just how much it stirred my creativity and my inspiration as a game master. I don't run my game in the Pathfinder setting of Galarian. I'm never going to run a game in the Inner Sea, but I came away from reading this absolutely bursting with inspiration and elements to go and add to my own game, things that I wanted to change. And I've already done a whole bunch of work off the back of this book. I redid my entire calendar. I introduced a new kind of fantasy football style sports league with its own mini game rules as a result of some inspiration from this book. So I want to talk to you about some of my favorite things from this book and why I think that it is worth every game master picking this up and taking a look. So we're not going to go in any particular order. We're not going to go sequentially through the book. I just want to give you some high level information. And the thing that really stuck out to me on my first read, the one thing that really got my attention, was there is a section on food and drink, on cuisine in the Inner Sea region. And in that section there is a 2-page spread of absolutely gorgeous art of all these different regional dishes laid up on a table, and then the next couple pages there is a cocktail list with recipes for cocktails that people in this region of the world drink, and immediately I was hooked. I love giving my players detailed information like that. Like when my players go into a tavern, I love giving them tasting notes on the drinks that they're going to find in that tavern. So having a cocktail list of things that I can pull from, include in my world, get inspiration from, use the art from to show to my players, I absolutely love that. It really helps get my creative juices flowing and think about my world a little bit deeper. And that's the whole point of this book. Every aspect of it is going to make you look at a part of your world and go, well, what if I thought about that just one level deeper? What would that look like?
Deeper and deeper. I wanted to go further.
There are a few mechanical things in the book. There's some astrological backgrounds right at the back of the book. There's some information on a couple of rituals, and then there's some tables, which I have found very useful. But for the most part, it is all very fluff and not very crunch. It's very antithetical to what people expect from Pathfinder. People come into Pathfinder and think this is a really crunchy system. It's all numbers, it's all mechanics, it's all min-maxing. Absolutely not. This is almost pure fluff. This is almost no mechanics and just inspiration. What mechanics are here I have greatly enjoyed. There is a table of housing prices that includes rent prices for different types of dwellings in different areas, whether it's rural or urban, as well as house prices for you buying houses. There's also a crime and punishment table that shows you a list of different crimes that someone might commit and what their punishments would be. I just took that entire table and pinned it to my GM screen. I was like, I'll have that entire thing, just sight unseen, not going to touch it, that whole thing, because players like to commit crimes, so it would be nice to be able to communicate to them what the consequences of those crimes would be, and maybe they won't commit the crimes. They'll still commit the crimes, of course they will, they're players. This video is sponsored by my upcoming Kickstarter for the SIDEQUEST annual. Ever since I started producing my monthly magazine SIDEQUEST, I've wanted to get it in print, but doing small print runs of such a small zine has never made any sense. But now that we've been doing it for over a year, I want to put together an annual that takes the first 12 issues, bundles them together in a hardback book, and makes them available in print for the first time. The Kickstarter is going to go live in September. I will leave a link to the sign up down in the description below. You're going to be able to get it in a beautiful hardback version. I'm also looking at making a special edition. Don't have too much detail on that yet, but it is something that I want to do in time for launch, a really fancy special edition cover that's exclusive to the Kickstarter. There'll be some day one deals as well as some modest stretch goals. I don't want to burden us too much with stretch goals because most of this content is already written and I want to get it out as fast as possible to the backers, but the link to that is going to be down in the description below. Go ahead and sign up to get notified when we launch. But for now, back to the video. The general approach of the Lost Omens travel guide is it starts with kind of high level stuff, and then it drills down into really specific things in like a narrow segment. So let's take the example of kind of art. So it has a section and it talks about how art is viewed in the inner sea region, and then it drills down and gives you a page of different artists, famous artists. Here's some information on all these famous artists. Here's some information on their great works. And that's super useful to me as a game master because I can sprinkle those elements in pretty much any fantasy campaign. I can take the artists and their great art out of the inner sea region, put them into my game, and when the players go into a library and they roll a random search and they say, right, what do I find? I can say, you find this famous book by this famous artist, and I can have them referenced by NPCs elsewhere and really build this idea that the players are familiar with this Shakespearean style artist. There's also a bunch of really cool maps in this book. There's a weather map for the whole region that shows you what the kind of weather climate is for the entire inner sea region. Super useful, again, for adding that textural layer to your game. So you can say, right, okay, you've moved from region A into region B. Here's how the weather changes. And things like that really help cement in your player's mind that they're in a living and breathing world. It's also maps for things like legendary monsters. Like here is a map of the inner sea and a bunch of legendary monsters. And if you want an entire campaign where you're going out and hunting monsters, there we are. That one page will sustain that whole campaign. There's maps for things like trade routes and what goods are being moved along which trade routes. Great if you want to give some texture for travel, so the players are moving along a specific trade route that's heavily known for trade in lumber. Well, you can describe carts laden with huge logs or milled lumber moving past them, and it just helps ground the world and give the players a sense of place. Or there's a cosmos map that shows the constellation and has a map of the moon phases. Excellent, especially if you want to introduce werewolves and other lycanthropic type monsters. Really useful for that. But also, if the players are camping for the night, you can describe how they look up and they see this specific constellation as it moves across the sky. This is what I mean when I say no matter what system you're running, I genuinely believe that this book will have some kind of use to you and will inspire you in some way. One of my favorite elements of it is the way it looks at a day in the life of different kinds of people in the inner sea region. So it has a whole section dedicated to what life looks like for someone living in a rural farming community. It shows an example of what their house might look like. It shows an example of what they might wear, what their daily process might look like, how they view the world and interact with the world. There's the same for someone living in a city. What does an urban house look like? What does their clothing look like? There's a whole section on fashion for different fashion trends and different things that people wear during holidays and festivals and different ceremonies. And that kind of information is always useful as a game master because you can pull from it to add even more texture to your world. You can have these different fashion trends in different cities. You can have fashion be an identifiable marker to say, oh, this person is from this place because they are wearing that style of dress that is developed and well known, and your players would recognize, or the characters would recognize. They also have information on like different rituals and festivals and holidays. All of these kind of things can just be lifted wholesale out of the book, couple of names changed, placed into your setting, and you've got all the information that you need for it. So I'd say if you are a homebrew DM and you have a homebrew world and you just want to texture it, you want some pieces of information that you can pull and put in that world to make it feel more lived in and real, absolutely pick this book up. If you're playing in the Inner Sea region, if you're playing a Pathfinder 2nd edition campaign, you're running it in Golarion in the Inner Sea region, this is a no-brainer. This is going to make your games feel so much more a part of that world. But if you're not, you're going to find so many individual elements throughout every single section of this book that you're going to be able to pick up and pull and put directly in your game, or that are going to inspire you to go and make more questioning choices about your own world. I'd really love to know if you've read the Lost Omens travel guide, what you thought of it, what's your favorite section of it so far. Let me know down in the comments below. I'll also put an affiliate link to the book down in the description. Picking it up through that will really help support the channel. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I release new videos every single week. But until next time, happy gaming.